Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com. And tonight we're going to talk about how the world hates you, why the world hates you, and what you can do about it. Welcome to the Reprehensibles. Welcome to the Unauthorized. Welcome to the VFM, to the Dread Ilk, and to the Bears. So, obviously there was a tremendous tragedy in Sri Lanka. 8 bombings, hundreds of people killed. And, this is following on from what we've seen in France. There's a lot of stuff happening all around the world. And now the West is aware of it. But this has been happening for decades. This has been happening for a long time. And we've been excused from that for a long time because we lived in Christian nations. I always get a little annoyed at the historical ignorance of those who say, the United States was never a Christian nation because it doesn't have an official religion. Well, we describe nations based on what religion most of the people practice. We consider the Soviet Union to be an atheist state when it wasn't. The only official atheist state in history is still Albania. But it would be very foolish to deny the position on religion of the Chinese state, for example, or the Soviet state, and so forth. And when you look at history, and you look at the way that the West, which is a synonym for Christendom, it's tragic to see how people in the West are sawing off the very branches on which their civilization rests. Let me see here. Yeah, we got a couple trolls going here. So, anyhow, I was wondering back in the 90s how long it was going to take for this sort of stuff to make its way outside of the Islamic world, where it had mostly been happening for really hundreds of years. But when you look at the way that it is, happening faster and faster, more and more often, it's time for the churches to begin to get serious about providing security for their worshipers. And that means churches everywhere, not just in Sri Lanka, which admittedly is where the suicide bomber was essentially invented, but everywhere, in France, in the USA. And this is something that we as Christians need to be aware of. Now, some churches are already doing this. Some churches already have armed off-duty policemen in place. I remember one church that I attended back in the States had a couple members who were Rangers who would be providing security. And, the thing is, it's necessary. It's absolutely necessary. And so, and those churches that are cucked and ban guns and that sort of thing, I think that they're going to find out very, very soon that that's not a wise policy. I totally agree. The church is the people. It's not the denominations. It's not the leaderships. And, for all of you, I would encourage you to begin to take responsibility for yourself and for those around you. If you look at the violence that's taken place, even in places like Texas, you can't blame that one on the religion of peace. And so, it's, we're facing the same thing in Europe. And, that conflict is inevitable. And, so is the conflict in the United States, although it's less likely to be religion-based and more likely to be ethnic-based. Logos or Die Bear says, just started reading Suicide of the West, and I really have to thank you for getting me to read it. Love the stream, and God bless. P.S. Throne of Bones is amazing. Suicide of the West, I assume he's talking about James Burnham's book, not the Jonah Goldberg book, which is absolutely worthless. Throne of Bones, of course, is one of my epic fantasies. And Binks is right. We've lived in a bubble for generations. Christians are now acceptable targets. It's true. And what a lot of atheists don't realize is that they are considered Christians too because they are Westerners. You're not going to get a pass. In fact, in some ways, Muslims find atheists to be even more offensive than Christians. And, so don't think that, by posturing about your godlessness, that it's going to spare you. You're still seen as a citizen of Christendom. That's why they refer to Westerners as crusaders. You can talk all you want about how you think the Spanish Inquisition was the worst thing ever. It's not going to cause them to take it easy on you. The Dashing Road says, what advice can you give to an autodidact who is looking for a job in IT? Tech recruiters don't seem to want anyone without a degree. Any advice? Yeah, what you need to look for is the technical qualifications. They'll go for those. If you've got the right qualifications, by which I mean IT-related skill-based courses that you can take and pass, that's what I would look into. Nuclear Pizza says, you've really been helping pull me out of being black pill. Can you do a stream on churchianity? I grew up in an evangelical environment and have trouble discerning what is Christian and what is churchian. I am very sympathetic to that because I too grew up in a evangelical environment, and there was a fair amount of, I would say, lunacy, bizarre focus on the end times. They were very into Hal Lindsey and that sort of thing. And when you look at the lunatic behavior of some of those people, you can wrongly, but understandably, confuse it with the faith itself. And so it's important to learn to distinguish the ism from the ist. You know, when we judge the falsity of Marxism, we don't make that judgment on the basis of how the individual Marxist behaves. We don't judge the truth or falsity of capitalism on that basis. Why then would we assume that Christians who we are specifically told, only see as though through a glass darkly, that they would get it absolutely right? Doesn't happen. And so, I had to learn to stop judging them for their intellectual flaws, because that's really what it was. Many of these people were actually very good people, but they had intellectual flaws. And as a intellectually fortunate individual, I found that difficult to swallow. But I learned that I was mistaken. I was wrong. So, Paul Williamson is quite generous. Vox, appreciate your insight. Paul, you're very welcome. I appreciate your support. It never ceases to amaze me how strong the level of support that the reprehensibles offer to me and to some of the unauthorized folks like Owen and David. We'll talk a little bit more about some new stuff there in a bit. Cinnamon Bear, I'll get to your super chat later. But the important thing I think that we need to keep in mind is that we have so many minor differences and minor arguments among ourselves, among our community in general, that perhaps we need to keep in mind that the world hates us. The world hates us because the master of the world hates our master, hates our Lord and Savior. And so keep that in mind when you are thinking about the wrongs that a fellow Christian has committed, the mistakes that a fellow Westerner is making. As long as those people are on the side of Western civilization, of the good, the beautiful, and the true, they don't necessarily have to be Christian. There's a lot of seekers out there. There's a lot of people who understand that there is a sickness in modern culture. They understand that there is a spiritual vacuum, if not an overt spiritual evil that is encompassing their society. They're not the enemy. But there is an enemy out there, capital E enemy. And he has lots and lots of servitors. And so I would encourage you to try to offer and experience more generosity of spirit, more mercy, more understanding towards your Christian brothers and sisters, towards your fellow Westerners, in the understanding that they're going to be your only allies in the end. They're going to be the people that you need to depend on. And so the hatred is real. We're seeing that. I've been telling you for a long time that I came to believe in the truth of Christianity and the reality of Jesus Christ once I was forced to confront the reality of evil. Christianity is the only religious or philosophical system that rationally accounts for the evil that we see in the world. A112165 says, survive, remember, rebuild, preserve, repeat if necessary. That's true. You know, there was a good line from the new episode of Game of Thrones that I thought was surprisingly good and probably had nothing to do with George Martin's contributions. But Samwise, or Sam Tarly, whatever his name is, he says death is forgetting. And that what people like Ben Shapiro and people like Jordan Peterson are trying to do is they are trying to make the West forget. They're trying to make the West forget who it is, who it was, and why it exists. And forgetting that is death. You know, Jordan Peterson is an intellectual bringer of death. Ben Shapiro is an active servant of death. Every bit as much as the men who are setting off those bombs in Sri Lanka. Because you either serve the way, the truth, and the life, or you serve death. You serve forgetting. You serve the year zero. Think about this. Why do so many socialist and revolutionary movements always insist on reinventing the calendar, counting from zero? Why do they need to change AD and BC to, BCE and so forth? It's because they need you to forget. They need you to, they need to define away history, because if you forget history, if you forget your story, you will forget who you are. You will not know who you are. Dylan Sewell says, I have 2 years of college left, but I hate it. I only stay in because my dad bribes me financially to complete it. Given that society is starting to collapse, would I be better off dropping out? It depends. If you're getting more into debt, yes, you'll be better off getting out. If you have a decent job that you can start now, you're probably better off getting out. Coke versus Pepsi? Coke. See here. M. Anthony Dunn asks, is Shapiro a Judeo-Easter worshiper now? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that'll be the next meme that he tries to push. It's always interesting to me how these different memes get going. What are your thoughts on minarchy? I think it's irrelevant. It's always strange to me how people concoct these imaginary systems that have never been seen to operate anywhere and then act as if it's a genuine alternative. It's not. What is Japan's view on Christianity? They have a tremendous, tremendously complicated relationship with it. They ferociously persecuted Christians in the medieval period, the late medieval period. We're actually going to be publishing a rather fascinating novel about that period. And there were actually hidden Christians that survived all the way up into the modern era. There's not very many Christians there. In fact, Christianity is growing much faster in China than it is in Japan. And obviously it's much more popular in Korea than elsewhere. But they do have a respect for it, because to them, the West is Christian. And they have a strong respect for Western culture in general. In some ways, it wouldn't surprise me if they do a better job of preserving various elements of the West than the West itself does. Neutrino says, my family is Mormon. I left and found Christianity. They consider themselves Christian. Should I debate it with them? I think you should discuss it with them. I mean, in my experience, Mormons almost invariably find a way to bring it up and talk about it sooner or later. And so if they do that, yes, then absolutely you should talk about it. But I would not aggressively push it on them. Then again, I'm not particularly keen on aggressively pushing anything on anybody. Because I believe that people need to come to things in their own time. If you let them know who you are, if you're honest, they'll figure out who and what you are relatively quickly. And if they want to know more, they will ask you, they will talk to you, or they will challenge you. And that opportunity will come. Wolf 3500 asks, do you still believe the USA collapses around 2033? Yes. Defiance Bear says, some atheists keep saying the world is too horrible for there to be a loving God. Yeah, that's a childish reasoning. As it doesn't affect the end result, I never consider that valid, but how would you counter it? It's very, very simple. The Bible tells you the world is ruled by evil. The world is ruled by the prince of this world. That is why Jesus had to come in the first place. Their level of Christian theology doesn't even rise to the level of the Chronicles of Narnia, much less C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. Jesus had to come because the world is evil. That the entire existence of Christianity is fundamentally dependent upon the idea that the world is evil. So I'm very familiar with atheists raising that argument. It's just so profoundly ignorant and so obviously stupid that it amazes me that anyone can do it with a straight face and expect anyone to take them seriously. David says, Christian nations need to either form an international Christian entente, armed, prepared for response, or we must be in the business of converting terrorists we capture in war non-Christian prisoners. I don't know about that. But the main thing is that Christians need to understand that they are in a real and significant worldwide war. And it isn't just Islamic terrorists who hate you. It's a much broader anti-Christian coalition than that. National Spare says, Vox, I received my BBA in finance from a prestigious B school with no debt. Is it worth getting my MBA if I don't need loan parents pay? I doubt it. I would get to work as soon as possible. Possibly you are. Here in Europe, they actually encourage people to get a few years work experience before they go for an MBA. But the MBA has been overrated for about 25 years. So I think you're much better off getting your career going. I don't know much about your theology. Do you believe in a literal hell of fire? I believe in a literal hell. I don't know exactly what it consists of. I don't subscribe to Dante's rather precise description of 9 circles and so forth. Let's see. All right, let me go back to the one guy's question. Nuclear Pizza says, Vox, I'm a Christian, but to give you an idea, I live in California and my pastor opposed my idea to move to Idaho because we're supposed to be salt and light. You're salt and light no matter where you are. Idaho is the world. That argument makes no sense. Let's see here. Oh, I missed. Corrali said Deus Volt, and Daniel asked last night, what did Austrian economists get wrong on usury? They believed that it was necessary to grow the economy. It's not. Cinnamon Bear says, Vox, I keep trying to hang out with a shy girl. She keeps blowing me off. Any tips? She doesn't want to be with you. Find someone else. A lot of the pickup artists talk about being outcome independent. That's very important. Why would you keep... Imagine it wasn't a girl. Imagine it was just a male friend that you liked. And he kept blowing you off. How many times would it take before you quit trying to schedule events with him? You shouldn't give a girl any more chances than you'd give a guy. People behave how they want. One of the most important things you can accept is that you can't control other people. You can't control what they do. You can't control how they feel, and you're not responsible for their emotions. And so, especially lower rank guys, omegas and gammas, but deltas too, to a certain extent, have a tendency to believe that how they feel about a woman should have some impact on how she feels about them. It doesn't work that way. It's just a compliment. It's a compliment that you like them. But so what? That says nothing about how they will like you. If they don't return your interest, if they don't return your affection, move on. Find someone who does. Fox, do you have any thoughts about Derek Prince? None whatsoever. No idea who that is. Joey Ace is trying Super Chat to see how it works. Joey, it worked beautifully. Thank you. Looking forward to the book club discussion. Yeah, I need to get on that soon. You'll have to forgive me. I've been insanely busy with this Indiegogo thing. We actually made some very, very interesting advancements on that today. So things are going to get very, very interesting, I believe, in about 2 weeks. Pravos Pilnit says, thoughts on Grigory? Oh, excuse me. It's a bit late these days, so anyhow, thoughts on Grigory Rasputin, good or evil? Probably evil. Not entirely sure. I mean, I know a bit about him, but not a lot. Make Brazil based again said, should I get my MD despite the giant loans? Well, I think that if things get difficult, being a medical doctor is going to be like, gold. I mean, that's would be a tremendous skill set in a post-civilizational world. Just to be clear, I assume with Rasputin. I assume we're talking about the Russian advisor to the Tsar. I don't trust mystics, and so I don't have a lot of confidence in him. Man, I don't know why I'm so tired. I was up late writing last night, so. The letters to Albert Pike speak of an engineered world wars, 3 of them the last between Islam and Christianity. Coincidence? Possibly. Lainey Lynn says, are you going to be able to discuss the Indiegogo situation one day? Absolutely. I intend to include it in corporate cancer. At this rate, it's going to account for most of it. Hano says, Vox, you mentioned the Space Trilogy. I found very thought-provoking ideas about theology and metaphysics, especially the last book. I need to read the last book. Again, I really didn't like it when I read it before. I've read the first two books several times, but I just dislike the third book. Roland Diaz says, Vox, will the DNC ever pick another white male as their candidate again? Probably. I think that this is a good time for them to pick one who isn't, because it's a sacrificial lamb anyhow. But they might at some point in time they'll try to turn. Once they realize they've lost the white vote, they'll try to bring it back. So you think in our lifetime we will see a complete societal breakdown? Well, not necessarily complete. I mean, you need to recall that there were entire parts of the world that were fine during World War I and World War II. That you wouldn't even know there was a war on. However, with the way that people can move around so rapidly now, that may not be the case. Especially with the way that nations are so denaturalized or denationalized with all the demographic movement and change. Synthesis says, Vox, what about a guy who says they want to marry you, but is unsure of himself to the point of being unsure of marriage? Can you count on potential if they show the willingness to work on themselves? Well, you can't count on potential, but it's a reasonable bet. I mean, it depends. If you're 18 years old, maybe you want to wait and let him prove himself a bit. If you're 30, take the bet. Oh, I see. M. Anthony Dunn points out Rasputin was not just a mystic, he was a degenerate. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me too much. That doesn't surprise me. Yeah, I mean, I do remember that he was supposed to be extremely filthy and that sort of thing, and that that didn't make me think that he was a good guy either. But again, I don't know much about him. My favorite Bible verse? Kind of depends. I have a few favorites. I mean, I like, lo, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. I always found the verse where Jesus says, the prince of this world is coming to kill me, to be very haunting. I think my favorite scene in the Bible is when Jesus confronts Thomas, and the warmth and the affection in the way that he greets Thomas's doubts, I think, should reassure every Christian who's ever had any doubts. So, not a very specific answer, but I'm afraid that's about the best I can do. David Condor throws in $1. Thank you. What happened to Owen? He looked frustrated. Well, he's been deplatformed and attacked and rejected by his peers and all that sort of thing. Why wouldn't he be a bit? He's been under tremendous pressure for months, and he's handling it pretty well. And so, we're going to be offering a new audiobook of his called Feed the Bear on Arcade and Comic soon. And if you want to support him, that's going to be a great way to do it. Especially for those of you who already subscribe to Unauthorized. And if you're not subscribing to Unauthorized, I'd highly recommend it. In fact, we're adding a new channel called it's called White Bull Business, and Farley and Elizabeth are happy enough with how Barcelona Life has been received that they thought, I managed to talk them into talking about the stuff that they're actually experts in, which is the business and the nexus of investment and technology. So should be interesting. Mark says, I ask this and hope you don't take it as disrespectful. Have you heard about the Noahide laws from Israel? Yes. If so, what are your thoughts? Just join the live stream. I think they're potentially a lot more dangerous than people realize, because it's not just about, all it is the Ten Commandments, because the way that the law about idolatry is interpreted is that they actually apply it to Christianity. And so I'm extremely dubious about them. When I think of Barcelona life, I think of people smiling on a brochure playing soccer in a soccer club. Actually, the next episode is going to be pretty epic. Nationalist Bear says, changed my subscription from PayPal to credit card on unauthorized. Love it so far. It's great. I appreciate that. Vox, do you plan on an engineering or mechanics channel on unauthorized? I think plan would be too strong a word, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do it, and if we do it relatively soon. Has Satanism infiltrated all religions? I don't know about Satanism per se, but certainly all religions have been converged to some extent. What do you know of Georgia, the nation's history? Very little, except for the fact that Trump being elected may have kept us out of war with Russia, because Hillary Clinton wanted to invite Georgia and Ukraine to join NATO, and Russia was never going to let that happen. So I think it was good for not just for the people of the USA, but also for the people of Georgia and Ukraine, because I'm pretty sure that they'd be occupied by Russian troops about now if that had happened. Do you know the White House signs off on Noahide laws every year? I'd heard something about that. It wouldn't shock me. Can we have a Darkstream on the difference between Satanism and Luciferianism? I'm not enough of an expert to say, but basically, to the best of my understanding, Satanism is mostly people play acting and LARPing. Luciferianism is more people who genuinely worship the god of this world, but they believe that he's got bad press. They tend to look at him more like a Prometheus figure, a bringer of light. So I know nothing about the Antikythera mechanism. And Nuclear Pizza says, I'm still too black pill for Barcelona life, but I'll buy Owen's book to help him out. Hey, that works. That works. Ukraine's president, the new comedian. Well, the interesting thing about that isn't that there's a comedian who got elected, although, who knows? Maybe there's hope for President Owen Benjamin one day. But the interesting thing about it is what a complete rejection of the neocon puppet that represents. Todd Poppleton must be new. Are you a dog or a cat person? I'm very, very much a dog person. Ozzy Owlis said, hey, Vox, what do you think about the concept of signs from God, or since we're in the realm of the flesh, signs, temptations from Satan? Regards, Oscar. Well, I think that they are potentially legitimate, and certainly the certainly the way things are developing are things that, tend to look ominously like some of the things described in Revelation, although you should also note that we appear to be a fair distance off from a situation where those things actually apply. But I'm very dubious when people pop up and start making prophecies about what God told them or some sign, because if they're wrong at all, then the Bible tells us very clearly they're not speaking from God. So Phil B throws in $5. Thank you. What are your thoughts on Pete Buttigieg? I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I think that he's just part of the attempted normalization of homosexuality in the States. I mean, he's totally unelectable. He's got no chance whatsoever. I think they're just running him for the same reason that every TV show has to have a gay character, and he is the television show Campaign 2020 character. Patriot Zero says, I believe in the values of Christianity, but have developed my own ideas of the Bible and religion. What would you suggest for someone like myself? I would suggest that you get over yourself. You haven't developed your own ideas. You haven't developed your own ideas of religion. You need to read more about the great thinkers of the past, both pagan and Christian, and you will rapidly come to understand that virtually nothing that you've come up with is new in any way, shape, or form, and that most of what you've come up with is hopelessly illogical and was thought through and rejected by people hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Again, we're getting back to that whole year zero thing. The less you know, the less you read about the past, the more that you've forgotten about our civilization and society, the more susceptible you are to believing that you can come up with your own brilliant new ideas. Trust me, I've worked on some of this stuff. I've actually come up with a few, very, very few small new concepts. And so, it's really remarkable when you read someone like Thucydides and you realize that some of the stuff that he's writing about could be written today. So, and I'm not saying this to be harsh or to be cruel. I'm saying this because I know exactly where you are. So let's see here. I want to make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, no, we're good. Actually, I just got a, let's see. Static Void, trust Vox as your spiritual leader? No, don't. God damn, every dude pretending to be religiously neutral is always looking to start a cult. It does seem that way, doesn't it? No, I'm not religiously neutral, but I'm also not a spiritual leader. I think that you would be making a big mistake to look at me in that regard. I'm an intellectual. I'm not a theologian. I wouldn't say that I'm badly read with regards to a fair amount of religious writers. I mean, unlike most, I've actually read Tertullian and Augustine and Aquinas and so forth. But that's not my primary area of interest, and so you can do better. Duralex Sedlex said, do the Russians do these kinds of preemptive land grabs just to put kill zones between the enemy and the motherland, or is there something else I'm missing here? Yeah, I mean, the whole reason that they would do that is to keep NATO missiles out. They don't trust the U.S. anymore. They were willing to trust the U.S. for a while back in the 90s, because they were given all kinds of assurances about, we're not going to move NATO eastward. NATO will never move eastward. Next thing they know, Poland's joining NATO, and they're talking about putting missiles aimed at Russia, that much closer to Russia. They won't permit it. They won't permit any more expansion of NATO. They'll go to war first. Let's see. Let's see here. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Call no man rabbi, call no man master. Thoughts on the term Easter worshippers, which the globalist media and Democratic politicians have been using so they don't need to say Christ? I think it's the exact same thing that we've seen in the war and Christmas. It's a little bit haunting when you realize how far back the war on Christmas goes. All those songs that we enjoy, Silver Bells, White Christmas, it's all meant to focus on the human experience and not the spiritual aspect of the holiday. Easter worshipers is just a way to, there's two things. First of all, it's a way to try to avoid mentioning Christians. And secondly, it's actually on a deeper level an intellectual slam, because what they're really trying to say there is Ishtar worshipers, because there's this not very soundly based atheist theory that Easter is actually a reference for Ishtar, and that this particular date, which again doesn't make sense, is the one that was celebrated by the worshippers of the goddess Ishtar. But there's no real basis for any of this. Anyhow, it's just anti-Christian rhetoric. That's what it is. It's anti-Christian rhetoric. No nuclear pizza. I'm not your spiritual pastor. But yes, you certainly have my permission to move to Idaho. Not that you need it. I would be more concerned about asking the people who live there. Should I be scared of the world Vox? No. But you should be aware that it's not your friend. Are there more gammas now than in the past? Almost certainly. It's a lot easier to live in a delusion bubble. Oh, read more questions. I thought that's what I was doing. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm actually caught up for once. Well, yeah, I just got a email, and it looks like we should have. We will definitely have Owen's Feed the Bear audiobook out this week. Yeah, we need to get the book club going soon. So we will get on that. Which states, areas should people stay away from for the collapse? You want to be in areas where you fit in, where people look like you and think like you and worship like you. So it's going to be different for different individuals. There's what might be right for one individual is not going to be right for another. Do you believe in the rapture? Uh, I would like to believe in the rapture. I hope that the rapture theology is right, but I think that it is most likely not. It's not a biblical. It's not a biblically founded concept. It's not one that any of the great Christian thinkers subscribe to, and so I am dubious. Is there an inner battle within the elite for economic control? There's nothing inner about it. There is no elite per se. This is why I get impatient with certain conspiracy theorists from time to time. There is no elite. There are elites, multiple, many, and they are rivals. And they cooperate, and then they get into conflict. And so, if you look at George Soros or Vladimir Putin or the president of China, these are all very much members of an elite, but you can't possibly put them all in the same category. Do you think Q is a sigma? I think Q is a group of people. This is funny. It's funny how people can't understand things even when you say something very specific. What do you mean if you ask, does evil exist? I'm not asking if evil exists. I'm telling you that evil exists. Evil is not a subjective concept. That's part of your whole problem. Evil is material. It is a real thing. Can socio-sexual hierarchy ranks be applied to groups? I don't think so, other than the fact that you can have groups of people in that area. No, I mean, there's no question that Q is a group. That's not my opinion. All you have to do is read the different posts. Different people wrote them. Different people have different writing styles. It's very easy to see. So, anyhow, if you get a chance, it'll be interesting to see how things go. I think that we're going to get a couple of the White Bull business stuff up. They have this treasure trove of material. I mean, they've got all kinds of stuff dating back to Bill Gates talking about how the internet is not going to be significant. I don't know what all they have in their archives, but we are going to arrange to get some of it up there, and then get also lots of new interviews and that sort of thing. So that's going to be pretty cool. Here's a question. Nationality is distinct from faith. Yes. How can we reconcile support for other Christian nations? It's easily enough. We want to support Christians in other nations. If we only protect our own, then why waste our breath? Because protecting our own is worth it. The whole idea of Christian nations is that their mutual Christianity allows them to get along better than they would otherwise. But they're still separate nations. So, Vox advice for young women: get married young, have lots of children young, and don't try to don't buy into the lie of college, career, and late 30s marriage. You won't be happy. Do you think National Socialism will return? No, National Socialism was a very peculiar and nation-specific ersatz political system. And it doesn't have any appeal in Germany, and it has no appeal anywhere else. Vox, have you always had the same beliefs? Not at all. Not at all. So, all right, well, thanks for tuning in. Kind of a mellow stream tonight, but, it's kind of a somber topic. And anyhow, I encourage you to stop by unauthorized.tv. Tons of free content, hours of free content every day, including the Darkstream. So I think Owen's getting started pretty soon if he hasn't started yet. So I'd encourage you to tune into him and check out the new Barcelona Life when it gets posted. Let me see here. There we go. Have a good evening. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.